Russell Brand, Narcissist, Part 8. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, continuing the examination of Russell Brand. Some narcissists are divisive characters. Their antics are abhorred by certain people, their rhetoric disapproved of, their attention-seeking causing people to regard them in a nauseous manner. Yet with others, their provocative nature is tantalizing, their charisma overwhelming, the antics that they get up to hugely entertaining. Russell Brand is a similarly divisive character, which again is an indicator of what he might be. That there are those that love him, find him fascinating, interesting, articulate and entertaining, others finding him seedy, sleazy, and a self-obsessed vaudevillian villain. We're now going to examine some observations about his behaviour provided by Suzanne Moore of The Telegraph before we move on to others that look at him in a more supportive light. Moore writes, "There's always been something of the night about Russell Brand, to use Anne Widdecombe's phrase. Widdecombe may indeed be one of the few women that Brand would try not to seduce, but Brand has always revelled in his own shadow, a darkness that has served him well. When he first appeared on MTV and then Big Brother's Big Mouth in the mid-2000s, people were knocked out by his sheer brio and verbosity. Here was an Essex dandy in skinny jeans with a hugely fat vocabulary who could never get enough of himself. Vanity, self-obsession. At the time, he was on heroin and crack, a dangerous kind of cheeky chappy who flirted outrageously with everyone he interviewed, lack of boundary recognition, who could not see a taboo without wanting to bust it, sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition. True, his way with words is indeed impressive, grandiosity. At the height of his fame, he hardly paused for breath as he proclaimed his revolutionary zeal. Now he faces some very serious allegations, charting a 7-year period. As these allegations were about to break, Brand made a video in which he said he absolutely refutes the accusations, claiming his relationships were always consensual. He described them on his incredibly successful YouTube channel as Baroque. What does this mean? Baroque is usually used to describe an ornate style of 17th or 18th century architecture or music. In fact, here it means nothing. Nothing at all. But Brand is a master at using language to both obfuscate and bedazzle. He has run rings around skilled interlocutors, such as Paxman and Bill Maher, with an incessant, garrulous stream of talking points. Such monologues and verbosity point to grandiosity. There is no pause for dialogue. Indeed, when others are talking, Brand visibly glazes over. This may well be the response as a consequence of him rejecting a Fletcher control posed by him not being the one talking. So he talks excessively. So what? Excess was, for a long time, his USP. An addict of drink, drugs and sex, an uncontrollable force of nature who is somehow reformed. Oh, how we love a redemption narrative, and how many took Brand to their hearts. His treatment of women, which has always been talked about, was recast in the era that so many lads' mags brought about just as part of his appeal. He was celebrated for 3 years running as Shagger of the Year. Women fell at his feet. I certainly did not know a female journalist or stylist or photographer or makeup woman with whom he did not try it on. Excessive flirtation, sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition, as part of his infamous 5-a-day routine. In 2006, Danny Minogue called him a bit of a vile predator, who had not cured the sex addiction he'd been sent away for the previous year. Brand's response was that maybe he had a bit of an eye for the ladies, but predator was ill-judged. What sort of language are you left with for Peter Sutcliffe and Ian Huntley? What a clever rhetorical flourish. In the next few years, Brand was to become a darling of the left, despite the Sachs scandal. He married Katy Perry, he went to Hollywood, and became a genuine celebrity. His exploits, tabloid fodder. He was best man at Noel Gallagher's wedding. It seemed as if he was everywhere, preaching revolution with his book He Wooks, and in 2013 he was asked to edit The New Statesman, as his then girlfriend Jemima Khan was his associate editor. When I was asked to edit an issue of The New Statesman, I said yes, because a beautiful woman was asking me. What a lad. Flattery. He campaigned for abstinence policies for drug addiction, and in 2014 joined the anti-capitalist protesters during the Million Mask March. He also protested about rent rises on the New Era estate, though at that time he was renting a property from a firm in the tax haven of the British Virgin Islands. Hypocrisy. A few months later, Prospect named him as the world's fourth most influential thinker. In 2014, George Monbiot talked about him as being the best thing that has happened to the left in years. He hung out with Naomi Klein, Alistair Campbell, Owen Jones, and started his own terrible news channel, The Truths. The revolution, it appeared, would be televised. It certainly became a book. He tangled with Paxman over the issue of voting, about which he was confused. He was considered so influential that poor old Ed Miliband trooped off to pay his respects. Everyone, it seemed, was just ego fodder. He would climb the ladder of politics, Hollywood, TV, quasi-mysticism, stepping on whoever had to be stepped on. The only thing you had to believe in was him. Now, if you see that as accurate, that shows the thrusting nature of his sense of entitlement and lack of accountability, may well be as a consequence of being driven by narcissism. But by this point, some of us were no longer enamoured of the ego, the leather trousers, the so-called carnality, and the incessant disruption. I wrote a piece in The Guardian in which I called him a winkle-picketed Jesus clown. I went on to say that a lot of what he had written was ghost-written Chomskyan woo. To my surprise, this revolutionary resorted to a legal letter threatening libel. Response to a threat to control? Apparently the sub-Chomskyan woo was not ghost-written. But by 2014, he was also talking a lot about a kind of Buddhist spiritual awakening. Notice how Brand has shifted so much in what he stands for and what he shows. Is this a chameleon behaviour of a narcissist? When I was asked by Vanity Fair to contribute to a profile, I spoke about how he cloaked his history, I'll call it sexism, in this new spiritual talk. He plays this double game, I wrote, being very self-aware of his past misdeeds, but I don't know how much respect he has or shows to women. Indeed, of his book Recovery, in which he reworked the usual 12-step program, where one must apologise to those harmed by one's addiction, he once said that to apologise to women for his promiscuity would be like Saddam Hussein saying sorry to individual Kurds. Grandiosity. It's a typical Brand line, knowing and self-congratulatory. The recent allegations make this less funny. They are very serious, even if no charges have yet been brought forward. Why did none of these women come forward before now, some ask? Well, would they be believed? Would there be enough evidence even though there are texts and corroboration? Brand was powerful then and is powerful now as some kind of wellness guru with over 6 million YouTube subscribers. He has settled down, but rather than changing nappies, he would rather hang out with alt-right figures with predictable conspiracy theories about vaccines, anti, Putin, pro, you name it. His slide from vaguely left to alt-right was seamless. He always thought he was special and had access to the truth. Grandiosity, magical thinking. Who is surprised? His ambition was always naked from early days. I'd like to be a film star, he said in an early pre-fame interview in 2002. Get £20 million from something that isn't all that good and a great big investment in my own ego. I'm going to work hard till they let me. One thing is for sure, Brand has only ever been about himself and his own power. Did he overpower young girls and make one gag and cry till their mascara ran, the thing he said he liked to see in his stand-up sets? Did he pin women down when they said no? He denies doing so. Well, enough was never enough for Brand. That seems to me his deal. There is no rehab for addiction to power. In the early days, I went to see him to try out some new material. Most comics do an hour or so. He just went on and on. Monologues, sense of entitlement. He asked the audience if they wanted him to stop as he boasted that he was getting the adoration his ego needed and he was insatiable. It was no longer funny. It was dark and desperate, and I got up and walked out. Those are the observations of Suzanne Moore, which, if you accept, provide us with some more narcissistic indicators. We're now going to move on to other areas of Russell Brand's life as we continue the examination of who he is.